Good morning, everyone. We're back today with Chapter 16 of Red Dog by Bill Wallace. As always, read with permission of Simon and Schuster. We are getting real close to the climax here. We've got 4 chapters left in the book, and I would say that the next 3 really represent that final rise towards the climax. So, without any further ado, we'll pick up where we left with Adam waiting for the end. As we ended chapter 15, here we go with chapter 16. Ruff's trail cry split the stillness of the morning air. Adam felt his eyes pop open. Ruff kept sniffing at where the rock had landed. Then his nose struck the ground. His tail stopped wagging and froze with a straight, quivering jerk. What on earth's that pup up to? Adam wondered. Ruff thrust his head toward the morning sky. He let out another high, shrill cry. Then he took off running. His nose to the ground, he crashed through the low branches of the cedar tree. Again he let out his trail cry, excited and urgent. The sound of his voice sent the chills racing up Adam's spine. "There he is!" a voice sparked out. Adam saw one of the men then. For the first time he could make out the color of the man's red shirt through the branches of the tree. Adam froze. He held his breath, so still he didn't even blink an eye. The man looked toward the tree, only he didn't see Adam in the rocks on the other side. He turned in the direction Ruff had gone. He took his hat off and scratched at his head. "What the devil you reckon that dog's a-doing, Max?" The other man came into sight less than 10 feet away. He frowned and shrugged his huge shoulders. "He's still a-chasing that boy. I knowed you didn't hit him. You can't shoot worth shucks." "I did hit him, Max," the man with the rotten teeth whined. "I know I did." "Then why's that dog still trailing?" There was a long silence. Adam held his breath. He felt weak. His head spun, but he didn't dare breathe, didn't dare make the slightest move, the slightest sound. If they'd just follow Ruff. Where was he headed? Adam didn't have the slightest idea, but if they'd just go after him, Adam would have time to make the top of this ridge. "Go on, Ruff," he urged in silence. "Take him away, boy." Only, as usual, Ruff didn't do what Adam wanted. There was another tree about 10 yards away from the place where Adam was hiding. Ruff's trail cry ended short when he reached the base of it. Then Adam heard him barking and yapping. He could even hear his feet scraping the bark as he jumped time and again against the trunk, like he was trying to climb up and get at something hiding there. "Boy must have treed," the man named Jack laughed. "Yeah," the big one called Max agreed. "This is going to be easy as squirrel hunting. Let's circle that tree and get him." They laughed and started off. Adam frowned. From where he clung to the ledge, he could see across to the tree where Ruff was making such a fuss. He could see clean up in the top of it above the thick branches. There was nothing there. Not a squirrel or a bird. Nothing. It was just empty. The red pup kept bouncing at that tree, though, barking and yapping for all he was worth. He'd leap into the air, dig at the tree with his paws like he was trying to climb up, then plop down on the ground again, like a wad of mud, before starting all over. Whatever Ruff was after, it was the first break Adam had had. He'd have to be careful, but with the men over there, and with Ruff making so much noise, he just might be able to make the ridge. He glanced at the wound in his leg. Each beat of his heart brought a dull, throbbing pain that flowed through his leg, clean down to his toes, then up again to the top of his head. "You can do it," he urged. "It'll hurt, but you got to make it." Quietly, he reached up and caught a rock that stuck out from the side of the cliff. It was a bad mistake. The stone was loose. When he tried to lift his weight, the rock came away from the face of the cliff. Adam tried to catch himself, but it was too late. He was holding on to nothing but that rock, and the rock was attached to nothing but empty air. He started to slide. Something bumped his leg. It sent the pain racing from the gunshot wound up his spine. Still, he managed to keep from yelling. But he was sliding down the cut in the cliff. Rocks came clattering as he fell. Then he was tumbling head over heels. The ground raced up to meet him with a shattering thud. The air whooshed from his chest. Small stones bounced and scattered around him like hailstones falling on dry leaves. When he stopped rolling, he sat up and opened his eyes. The wound from his leg throbbed as if someone were pounding him with the dull end of a chopping axe. The two men turned from the tree where Ruff was. "There he is!" one shouted. They raced back to where Adam sat. He started to shake. He couldn't stop. The sweat popped down on his forehead. The men moved closer. Using his hands and seat, Adam scooted away from them an inch at a time, afraid to take his eyes from their sneering, ugly faces. The big man named Max gave a deep laugh. "Be danged if you didn't nick him, Jack. See there on his leg?" Jack smiled. When he did, his rough black teeth showed. "I told you I hit him." He rocked back, really proud of himself. Then his squinty eyes narrowed as he looked at Max. "Since I was the one that slowed him, I get to finish him, right?" Max shrugged. "Can't see why not. We was told to stop him. Might as well do it permanent like. Stop him dead." They both laughed. Jack ran a tongue across his black rotted teeth. He pulled back the flintlock on his rifle. Max reached out a hand to stop him. "Best use your knife. If his daddy wasn't here in range, we'd sure hate to scare him off." Adam felt something hard against his back. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the flat rock face of the cliff behind him. He'd backed away as far as he could, backed right into the rock cliff. There was no place else to go, no place to run. A shimmer of light caught his eye when Jack drew the stag-handled knife from his sheath. Adam swallowed. The man started toward him. Adam didn't want to die, but he wouldn't cry. If he could, he'd face death like a man, not a kid. Only as he thought about being brave, he felt the knot draw up in his stomach. He held his shoulders back and bit down on his lip. The man took another step. He raised the knife to his shoulder, getting ready for the final thrust. It was then that Ruff caught on that these men meant to hurt his master. The hair popped up in a jagged ridge down his backbone. He crouched low, showing his white, shining fangs. Behind the man with the knife, Adam could hear Ruff's deep, threatening growl. "Sick 'em, boy!" Adam heard himself scream. "Tear 'em up!" There was an earth-shaking roar, like the sound of a charging she-bear, the sound of growling, snapping teeth, running feet. Before the man with the knife could even turn, Ruff hit him square in the back. It sent him tumbling. He staggered past Adam to land in a sprawled heap on the ground. "Eat 'em up, Ruff! Sick 'em, boy!" The man tried to defend himself, but Ruff seemed to come at him from every direction. He bit at the man's back, his head, and his arm. Mostly, Ruff's angry teeth lashed at his knife arm. The man yelled. He tried to get to his feet. Only each time he did, Ruff would hit from another direction. He'd send the man squealing and spinning away from his angry jaws. "Eat him up, Ruff! Chew his arm off!" Then the man named Max charged in. He held the rifle above his head like a club. His fat stomach bounced and jostled as he ran toward the fight. At the last second, Adam shoved himself to his feet and pushed away from the face of the cliff. It made his wounded leg hurt something terrible, but he flung himself forward and stuck out his right leg. The top of his bare foot caught the top of Max's boot. The big man let out a startled yelp. He went staggering forward. His feet churned to keep his balance, but finally he went flying. His fat, clumsy body floated through the air and carried him over Ruff and the squealing man who was ready to give up the fight and run for a nearby tree. Max landed in a heap against the rock cliff. But it only took him a second to get to his feet, and he was madder than ever. "I'll get you for that," he snarled at Adam. "I'll rip you apart with my bare hands." Then he grabbed his gun and headed back to Ruff. The man with the rotten teeth was squealing like a pig stuck in the mud. Ruff had him by the back of the neck and was hanging on for dear life. The more the man squealed and jumped around, the harder Ruff clamped down. Somehow his stag-handled knife had been lost. The sleeve of his shirt was ripped and tattered. Ruff was an easy match for this coward. But concentrating so hard on tearing this scoundrel apart, he wasn't watching for a sneak attack from the big man behind him. Max crept closer and raised the rifle above his head. Run, Ruff! Look out! Adam's warning came too late. Besides, Ruff was growling so loud he wouldn't have heard him. The butt of the rifle cracked into the pup's side and sent him flying through the air. When he hit the ground, he couldn't get to his feet. The pup had never been one to complain. He wasn't a whiner or a beggar, but now Adam watched helpless as his pup lay whimpering on the ground. His feet clawed at the sand, only he couldn't seem to get up. Adam felt fear grab him, then felt it rush up his backbone. He felt the skin on the back of his neck tingle. Both men were on their feet. Max, the big one, held the rifle over his head. The other one had the stag-handled knife in his hand. Angrily, they moved toward the helpless dog. "Don't!" Adam screamed. "Don't kill him! Please!" The tears rushed down his cheeks and clouded his eyes so much that he could barely see the two ugly, ruthless savages that were going to kill his dog. He struggled to get to his feet. He stood, then fell as his wounded leg crumpled beneath him. He lay helplessly on his stomach, and he knew there was nothing he could do to help Ruff. He saw her then, saw her for the first time. Why he glanced to the cliff above, he didn't know. A sound, the feel of eyes watching, a movement just barely within his vision? Adam didn't know. Only he looked up and felt his breath catch in a lump at his throat. The mountain lion. She stood, silent as the breeze on a windless night, as tall and proud as the mountains themselves. He'd seen her before, but never this close. Her size made him blink and draw back. He had seen bears that couldn't match her weight. The huge muscles in her shoulders rippled when she crouched. She was old, too. Her brown hair was tipped with silver. Her yellow eyes had a strange deepness, like the eyes of one who had watched life for a long, long time. As she moved closer to the edge of the cliff above him, there came not the slightest sound. Silent as death itself, her presence seemed to stop the breeze that whispered through the trees. The two men noticed the sudden stillness. One stood with his rifle poised above Ruff's head. The other twisted a knife between his fingers, eyeing the tender spot in the red pup's stomach. They were ready to kill, but they stopped. They looked at each other, listening to the silence. Adam blinked as she sprang. When his eyes opened, the whole scene in front of him had changed. The big man screamed out with terror and pain. The mountain lion ripped him with her claws. Her long, glistening fangs sunk deep into his shoulder. He fell to the ground, twisting and shrieking in agony. The man with the rotted teeth fell when he tried to jump out of the way. In a second, he was on his feet, running for his life. Somehow, Ruff had gotten up. The man ran for his rifle, but Ruff got him first. He sunk his teeth into the back of the man's leg and sent him sprawling into the dirt. He came up with a mouthful of sand that wasn't near as black as his teeth. Ruff lunged at him again. Adam saw a sparkle of light on the knife blade. Then Ruff screamed. Yelping, he wheeled back in pain. Blood gushed from a gaping wound in his stomach. The man with the knife looked down at the blood on his leg. His beady eyes squinted to a killer look. He raised the knife again. Only she was there before he could bring the knife down. She came like a flash of light. One leap carried her more than 20 feet through the air. Snarling and slashing like an angry she-bear protecting her cub, she tore into him. Adam heard his scream. It was the most frightening sound he'd ever heard. A sound of terror and pain and death, all rolled into one short, panicked scream. He couldn't watch. Frightened by the horrible sight before him, he fell to the side and covered his head with his arms. The snarling and screaming came closer. He shivered, trembled all over. Then, suddenly, everything was quiet. Slowly, carefully, he raised his head and opened his eyes. The mountain lion was gone. As quickly and silently as she had come, she disappeared again, vanished into the quiet. Adam held his breath. For a long time he was afraid to sit up or raise his head and look around him. When he did, the sight almost made him sick to his stomach. Both men were dead. There was a whimpering sound beside him. Adam looked down and saw Ruff trying to lick the bullet wound in his leg. The pup's big brown eyes rolled up at him, and he tried to whimper. "Poor thing," Adam said, softly stroking his head. "That skunk went and ripped you wide open." He could see the trail of blood where Ruff had dragged himself when he came to be beside Adam. Very gently, he rolled the pup on his side. Then he closed his eyes and rolled the pup back to his stomach. Finally, Adam opened his eyes and forced a smile to his face. "It isn't too bad, pup," he lied. "You're gonna be just fine." Chances were the pup couldn't understand him, but Adam figured if he lied a little and tried to make it sound like things weren't too bad, it might ease the pup some. The cut was a bad one, though. The knife had gone deep. It had left a wide, gaping hole in Ruff's stomach. If he didn't get help soon, he didn't have a chance in the world. Adam remembered how his dad had brought coonhounds home all ripped up and bleeding. Mother was good with a needle and thread. He could remember Dad saying, "Ain't another woman in the country that can do as fine a job at sewing up coonhounds as your mother, Adam. Why, I've seen your mother lick a stitch to hounds that has been ripped clean from their snoot to their tails, and after 2 weeks they'd be running trail again." A smile came to Adam's lips when he remembered his father's words. Then, as he looked down at his leg, a frown chased the smile away. Mother could save this dog. Maybe. But how could he get him home? He couldn't even stand up, much less drag a hurt dog. And if somehow he could manage, then what? That other man was still there, the one called Pete. He was there, waiting for Sam. What if Sam had already come home? Adam knew he'd missed him. He was 1.5 miles from the river, too far for Sam to hear the commotion, even if he'd been close. What if Sam had already gotten home? What if the man called Pete had already killed him? What if he'd killed Mother and Lori? What if...